Oh, I got Carolyn back there. Flexibility right now, or the capabilities. Let's see what my phone is at. About to have me flipping tables. I regret this. Oh God. So I'm hoping that money for the integrated services, that's the stuff, remember I was telling you, commissioner area, chairs, the education portion of the state level. That's why I feel like it's better.
You need this? The action plan? You have it?
Oh, Sinead.
All right. Ladies and gentlemen, let's try to get this meeting started. We're already running a little bit behind schedule. All right. I'm going to call this meeting to order. It is now 5:43. Apologize for starting late, but the minutes say we're to start at 6, but my notes indicated we were supposed to start at 5:30. Yeah. Oh, okay. We're going to begin as we always do with the Pledge of Allegiance. I'm looking for a young Commissioner Shepard. Would your daughter, do you think, be willing to do the Pledge of Allegiance? Come on up. Let's give her a round of applause, a round of encouragement. We always try to get young folks to lead us in the pledge. Would you mind leading us in the Pledge of Allegiance? Your mom can help you out, I'm sure. You can pull that mic down. All right. She's here so much. She's like an ex officio board member. Uh-oh, it doesn't want to come down.
You got it.
You got it?
Yes.
Okay, here we go. We're ready to start whenever you are. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you very much. Let's give her a round of applause. Thank you very much. She did an excellent job. I heard somebody say she did a nice job. She did. She did an excellent job. Mike Schmidt is giving her a high five. Well-deserved high five. All right. We have no speakers, correct? Or do we? Nope, no speakers on the speakers list. Just to provide a little context, again, for those who don't know, the board has switched to 2 meetings a month. This isn't one of our 2 meetings. That second meeting will take place on January 24th. This is just a special meeting. There may on occasion be the need to have such meetings, but we're trying to consolidate and streamline our meeting process, and so this is part of that process. The first item on the agenda is to review and discuss EPO updates and December financial reports. I was speaking to Commissioner Powell earlier today about those financial reports. Do you want to sort of give us a quick update on that?
Sure. In the absence of a committee and a chair, I went ahead and met with our finance folk yesterday just to preview the materials. Come to find out the reports that had been run for tonight's meeting weren't right, have to be redone, so they're not ready for today. Also, we don't have the quarterly change order reports. That'll be both of those reports will be available to us on our business meeting next Thursday. But we do have 3 resolutions to preview, and we have the EPO financial statements to look over. Carlene has a very brief PowerPoint for us, and then we have one East resolution and 3 other district-wide resolutions. Am I right? Is there a resolution for East? No, just 3 resolutions for the district to preview. There are no resolutions to vote on tonight, but so it's a very brief agenda. Okay? Is there any way that one screen can be tilted towards the board so that we can look at the PowerPoint from the monitors? Are they going to be visible, though? Are they going to be clear enough for us to be able to see them?
They're in your packet as well.
They're in the packet. You have printouts. I wasn't anticipating printouts. I'm trying my best to support a paperless system, but Carlene, you want to come up and speak to your PowerPoint?
Thank you, Commissioner Powell.
Good evening, everyone.
Good evening.
Thank you. While they're pulling that up, I won't waste any time here. You do have the PowerPoint presentation, I believe, in front of you this evening, is what Commissioner Powell had stated. Mm-hmm. And what I just wanted to let you know was that the very first slide within the presentation does a year-over-year trend analysis of where our expenditures at East stand at this point in time. It's a very collapsed analysis, just to make it a little bit easier for everyone. But as I go along in explaining the differences, the variances year over year, please just feel free to keep referring back to that first slide. I try to make it as easy as possible. When you're taking a look at the compensation expenditures, meaning our staffing expenditures for East, and this is, again is period December 31st, 2017 as compared to December 31st, 2018. And what you're going to see is there is an absolute reduction in the expenditure line of in excess of $265,000. You may recall that at East we had reduced our staff by 13 teachers, and then we had an additional 2 other support staff positions that we reduced this past year. And so as you're looking at it from a prorated basis right now, the net realized gain in that line item would be $265,000 and change. The cash capital outlay expenditure is pretty straightforward and very simple. We had expended in monies to improve the sound system within our auditorium. It was a sound system that was neglected over the years, and we invested the money so that not only would East have access to a better sound system, but it makes it more community friendly so that our community partners could come in and use the auditorium for their forums as well. The interesting thing about financials is that as you go along, it's always going to be dynamic, it's always going to be changing. And even though the expenditure for that sound system was recognized within the 12/31/17 financials, later in the year we were able to move that expenditure over underneath the community schools grant. So even though it's showing as an expenditure at this point in time, it truly ended up being a grant experience. So pretty much net year over year, it's just the way the numbers fell at that point in time. And we're looking at now the facilities-related expenditures and technology. We are moving to a more digital platform, and so therefore what we're going to start to see will be reductions in the traditional instructional supply line items. So if you have paper and that type of thing, it's going to be reduced because we're moving to a more digital platform where we are using software to accomplish the tasks. And as Commissioner Powell is stating, moving to a more green-friendly environment of moving away from written documents, hard copies. When you're taking a look at the all other variable expenditures, I coupled that with the miscellaneous expenditures. We're $75,000 to the good, and that is in alignment with the promise that Dr. Nelms had given you at the beginning of the budget year, that it was our intention, our absolute intention, to continue to reduce reliance upon outside vendors. So in summary, one more slide. We are looking very favorable year over year. We're looking at approximately $441,000 to the good, and we do fully anticipate that we will be returning unexpended funds back to the district again at the end of this year. Very good news. Any questions?
Nope.
Okay. Thank you.
Yep, thank you. Mr. Powell, you want to finish the review of those 3 resolutions?
Yes, if you'll look at the yellow pages at the dais, we have, Everton's not in the room, Rodney's not in the room. I guess I'll just have to speak to these.
Can you hold on one second? Because I realize, I'm sorry, Commissioner Powell. This is all new to us, this process. Normally, what Commissioner Powell is doing, for those of you who don't know, would be done at a committee meeting. Now the whole board is considering these resolutions. As she indicated, we're not voting today, but the whole board is having an opportunity to review. So it appears that there's a bit of a glitch, and I could be wrong. Normally at the committee meeting, Everton or someone else in his staff would provide some presentation on these resolutions, and the chairperson would not be doing that.
Exactly.
Is there some reason why, and again, this is new, so maybe they just didn't put it in their schedules. Is someone here?
Well, I do know that, Everton knew that we weren't going to be presenting the financial reports today.
Right.
I don't imagine it escaped his attention that we do have resolutions to speak to. But we could have the sponsors of each resolution.
We can do that, and I'm also making sure that Everton knows what the agenda was and the timeliness of it, so we're checking right now for him as well. I do know he wasn't aware of all the formatting, so we will take care of that. But if you need individuals up for the resolutions, we can do that as well.
Actually, I do need to back, he just arrived.
Okay.
I do need to
There he
back
is.
up. I got ahead of myself, and I didn't ask my colleagues if they had any questions for Carlene and the East High financial presentation.
She asked us if we had any questions,
Okay.
so she covered that.
Good, okay. My hope is that on next Thursday's meeting, we will do a similar PowerPoint presentation of the district's financials. We'll focus on the variances, but the actual expenditures over the budgeted expenditures and why those variances might exist. But Everton, would you be willing to give some advance notice to my colleagues about the premiums, the bond premiums that are going to be affecting our revenue stream?
Yes. Okay. So when we had original budgeted, we have 2 items as a result of the bond issuance that we have. One is premium on the bond that we issue. And what that is basically when you, like a corporate company, you go out to issue a stock, and the rate that you get for the stock is more favorable than you anticipated. So when we issue a bond, the rates were more favorable than we anticipated. So there is a premium on our bond price. So that's a give for us for about $4 million. Our capital market brokers, they declared that to us about a week ago, that we have that money coming into us. So that's something that was never planned for, because you never know what the market is going to do. So that's one piece. The other piece was subsidies and capitalized interest. And what that is based upon the amount that you borrow, the state will reimburse you a subsidy and or what we call capitalized interest on the bonds that we have. Now, this is the last year that we are going to be eligible for it. So in our budget for next year, it's not there. But based upon the numbers we have for this year, it will be in the report that we are going to be presenting next week, Thursday. That's about $3 million. So those will be in the actual reports that we are presenting when we present the financial report next week.
So we have a windfall of about $7 million.
And again, this is the only year, last year we were getting it, because the state let us know that you're not going to get it going forward. We have been getting this for the past 5-6 years, and this is the last year they said that they're going to allow us to get that capitalized interest and the bond premium.
So I just want to clarify. So I don't look at it as, for myself, as a windfall. It's like we're going to be losing $3 million that we have had in the budget up until this point for the next budget year from the state, because it's ending this year. The $3 million.
Yes.
It's ending. The $4 million, that's a one-time thing this year. We can't really plan for money that we may not have next year with the $4 million, because it can come in at a different rate.
We're not budgeting for that.
Okay.
So the premium, you only get it when you issue a bond. So in a couple of years, when we issue more bonds for the FMP, if the market view us more favorable than we're going to get it. But you only get it after you've issued bonds. And as it relates to the subsidies and the capitalized interest, we didn't budget for that this year, because the anticipation was the state was going to pull that information, but they allow us to keep it.
But this is the last year.
This is the last year. So when we were forecasting for next year, it was in our original forecast. But when the news came in or the information came in that you're going to only get it for this year and not next year, we pulled it out.
Okay. Thank you.
We pulled it out of next year. So the projection that we gave to the board for next year, it's not in it. So we actually pulled it out. Again, next week when we report, we're going to have all that detailed out.
But that, as Cynthia was correct, that all $7 million is a windfall this year. It will be applied to our reserve. It'll offset some of the $20 million in reserve that we had pulled to balance the budget.
Not to leave it on the field for play.
Yeah.
It's going to be taken out and reduce the $20 million that we have to that tune.
Excellent.
So, Everton, would you like to speak to the resolutions before us as well?
Well, the resolution before us, the only 619, from a purchasing point of view, like food service would submit to us that they need all these things, and one of the things we want to make everyone know is that BOCES, when we did a bid, BOCES actually provided the cheapest rate. So that's why before you is a resolution to go with BOCES, because we actually did put them through the bidding process, and they came out as the best price. So as to why they're utilizing all that resources, then we'd have to get someone from food service to talk about that. But we wanted to make sure that the board knows that this went through our procurement process, where we went out for bid, they were the lowest bidder, and that's the process that we have.
If Mike can explain why this is necessary. Is this for
Food service.
this year?
Yes.
For this school year? Yeah,
Well,
Mike.
it's for this
it goes from
calendar year.
January through December of this year. So it's a part of this year up until June, and then it rolls over the next school year. But from a calendar year point of view, it's a full calendar year.
So these are just typical supplies, but that we got another vendor?
That we had another vendor?
Yes.
I don't know if it's changing vendors, but we know that when we did the bid, there were multiple vendors, and BOCES came out on top. So we awarded them the contract.
Oh, okay, I guess I'm a little confused of BOCES versus regional distributors. So explain to me, regional distributors versus BOCES. Is that who BOCES use, regional distributors? If you look at the third paragraph under resolve, it says authorized to enter into a contract with regional distributors. So is it regional?
1 year.
Is that, what I'm asking, is that?
There are, it went to BOCES, but they're going to use regional, I think they're going to use regional service distributors.
Maybe
I don't know
Mike
what
can-
regional distributors, maybe the manufacturer of the product, because BOCES don't manufacture anything.
Yeah.
So they have the contract with regional distributors to supply these items.
Okay, if Mike can chime in.
The last way you phrased it was correct.
Yeah.
Okay,
So BOCES had a contract with them. They were, because
so these are just
regional
typical
distributors
supplies that we
never-
need?
Regional distributors never bid for it because they have BOCES.
Okay,
So they never went for the bid, so because they're a wholesaler, so what they do, BOCES is the distributor that uses.
how much are we
their service.
saving
by
going with this?
I can get a
Is
total
there,
number of
is there some, because BOCES buys in quantity, is that why we're doing it this way? Or, I mean, why would we, and there may be a very simple answer, is why would we use a middle person?
We're able to
But-
piggyback on the
but
BOCES
maybe
contract.
they're
That's
getting
right.
savings by purchasing in bulk for other districts. Is that what's happening?
In essence, Commissioner Powell, what you said was correct. We're able to piggyback on their contract, for a better way of saying it, and
Okay.
get the best possible price for the product. So it works.
And when BOCES bid not only for us,
And bid for,
they bid for Greece and
it's cheaper.
all the other districts. So when they do that, they can
get a better price.
force the vendor to provide a better price because of volume.
Okay.
It's the same thing we do with our utilities when we go through BOCES. So they go out and bid for our utilities. So because we are just we are not a component district, but because they represent all the central school district, they get a good price. And when we add our volume to that, they get an even better price.
Sure.
I'd like to know at some point what it would be if we had to purchase these products ourselves versus getting them through BOCES.
Through BOCES.
That includes our utilities as well as our products for food service.
We should be able to get that information just by looking at the results of the RFP process and find out who the competitors were and where we do have a document that references the BOCES bid, but we don't have the other potential providers to compare that to,
right.
so.
But we can find out from them.
Any other questions regarding 619 or 6?
Do we know what the maximum amount of the contract is in 1 year?
It's not done as a
maximum
not to exceed in this case. The purchases have to stay
it-
within the food service budget, so they're not going to buy any more than they can use in this year.
And it also depends on the volume, so that's why when we bid, if you notice in the line, we determine a price for each product, or each class of product. So it depends, one, on the volume that we're using, and I don't have the volume as to how much we're using in food service for each of those products. So when we negotiated, or we went out to bid, they had to bid on each of the categories that you see highlighted here. And that's the best price for each of the categories. Yeah, Michael was saying it based upon the menu for the next 6 months. So, and also, that depends on the volume. So, because sometimes we can't predict the volume, we go for the best price for each of the category. Just like with Staples, when we go to Staples, we don't bid Staples $500,000. We bid Staples each of the items, and we drive the price for each item. So, regardless of how much you purchase from Staples, you're still getting the best price per unit, and that's how we do it. But, you know, we can go back and see what volume of each of those we have utilized, like for last year, and multiply it by the individual price to come up with what a volume price would be, if we like that.
Any other questions on 619? Okay, we aren't actually voting on these until next month, though.
Right, that's right.
Next week.
Next week.
Okay. The SECRA report, resolution number 620, is one of the last stages of our facilities work. Mike, do you want to give a thumbnail outline of what the SECRA is and what this resolution is?
Sure, absolutely. In paragraph 2, it kind of outlines what the general premise of the seeker is. In this case, the seeker is for our entire CIP projects for the summer of 2019. It's in essence the last step of the process. It will be submitted to state ed, and what it shows is that there is no impact to wetlands or anything of the sort of any of the projects in this particular phase of our CIP, not the FMP, just the CIP work for this coming summer. I think we've got 18 projects across the city. So it's a order of operations that we need to do on an annual basis as in line with the state ed guidelines.
Liz, you have a question?
Yeah, so it sounds like the question is our construction impacting the environment? I'm wondering about in the opposite direction, as in the environmental concerns that were around St. Paul lands.
Right.
What about the land having stuff in it that might impact the buildings in the other direction?
Absolutely. So anytime we go into the ground for any particular project, there has to be all sorts of testing, because many of the sites adjacent to schools, in some cases are brownfields or whatever it might be, all that's required in the process. So the best example would be our current work at the former number 6, our new number 22 school, the addition that approaches Upper Falls. We had to, test all that particular area, do all the soil samples before we went into the ground. And if we had found something in that case, we would have to remediate that particular area. So this is different than that, because it's obviously the way you stated in the forehand. But when before the project actually begins, all that test work needs to be done. Much of the work here doesn't involve us going into the ground. We're not putting additions on any buildings or anything of the sort. But we did do it, for example, at the project at number 19 most recently. We did some test work there on the front end of that building. So there are circumstances, but they're very rare in our CIP work.
I have one question. I was wondering, who makes the certification that all the projects are routine, are not sensitive?
We hire a consultant to do all the test work for us, and that's part of the process that we go through out of CIP work. And that consultant will make a determination based upon their analysis, and then that analysis is provided to state ed.
So I was wondering, in the last line, maybe it was a question for Carl, is it possible to say based on that certification, the final determination of the Board of Education is such and such?
Yes. Yes.
So if we could just make that one change based on the certification.
Can you state again what you want to see changed?
Under resolved, on the last line.
Yes.
Based on the certification of the corporation, it is the final determination of the Board of Education.
And again, what's beautiful about this process is when this comes up for a vote next week on the 24th, those changes will be included.
So we're only talking about, though, the central office emergency generator?
This is a reference to all the projects that we're doing this summer.
Okay, so, but it includes this central office?
Yes, it does.
And what is that? What is an emergency generator?
In fact, if you recall, back in the spring, we had last spring, we had a power outage here. Our generator on site didn't function as it normally should. It kind of reached end of life. 15, 20 years. It was so what we needed to do. So you saw we actually were using a backup generator, storing it here in case we were going to need it over the course of that time. We're now, because all of our operational systems are housed here in the basement. That's where all of our emergency backup and so forth is. That we need to have a generator that's on site that can actually function to keep that going. Right, the generator previously allowed for us for about 90 minutes of us to get the power back running, and that normally would work in the case of where we are in terms of the power grid, but, you know, just did not feel comfortable as a long-term strategy for us to go ahead and do that, because we're going to continue to house all of our essential systems here. So the decision was made to put a generator that not only would be able to function in a much longer lifespan to keep the building operational, but also would support other systems in the building as well, so we could continue to work. If the power were to go out, we would not have to send everybody home, for example. So we could maintain about a 90% operational capacity.
So the question to the clerk and to Mike, you got the changes that Commissioner Davis had requested?
No, I was not able to capture the changes.
Can you restate what?
Oh, sure. I don't have the name of the corporation, but based on the certification of the corporation that's making the certification, this is the last paragraph. Resolved.
Resolution 620.
So you would like it to say resolved? It is the final determination based upon the company that conducted the work.
The company that.
Yeah, then the Board of Education would, all right, once I consult with, okay, very good. Do you know where we're headed with that? Okay.
Okay, thank you.
Terrific. Okay, we'll make the adjustment.
All right.
Okay.
Thank you, everyone.
Okay, the next resolution, 621. Oops, I'm sorry, 625. We're not going in number.
Does anybody,
Now, Everton can explain it at a high level, but this is, essentially, we have to outsource certain kinds of evaluations. Everton, is there someone who can explain this, who's actually on the evaluation side rather than the finance side?
okay.
Well, I have a question for the finance side as well, so.
Okay,
Okay.
so what is clear to me, and again, I said last week of my own performance of this new process, I might be making mistakes, you know, so what I'm about to say, I've said about myself. We have to pay attention, and again, I made mistakes last week because this is all new. We have to make sure we are ready to do this. This is a new process. And you have to, I mean, people are, and again, I made the mistakes last week. People are looking around, who's gonna talk about this? This is the committee, essentially. That's what we're doing now. And I've been to many finance committee meetings, and there's never been a glitch. People are always, all our committee meetings are always set. This is a new process, so I'd ask you guys to sort of tune yourself into what's going on to make sure that there's somebody here that can address these things. Because I know, I've been to lots of finance, and there's never been a glitch. People are always prepared. So this is a new setting, so make sure that when you see these agendas, you have somebody prepared to discuss them. So go ahead, Evan.
Right. So this is a special ed order, so I'm not able to speak on the special ed items, but I can get a response to you.
Yeah, I have a question, though. How much money are we spending on evaluation services in total? These kinds of evaluation services? Okay, if you need to get back to me on that.
I'd have to get that.
Okay.
And again, let me just repeat, the whole purpose of this is so that when the 24th comes along, we are informed and ready to vote. Now, the good news is, there's a little bit of lag time. So if you don't have the answers, we have until the 24th to get them. But optimally, what we were shooting for was to have the information just like we would at a committee meeting. So no problem, Everton, or whoever would be responsible for that, responding to those questions. You have a few days to get the answers to. And by the way, as we work this out, I don't see these kinds of questions being put in the question log because they weren't when they were in the committee. Okay, so you just get back to Shanae or the commissioner and copy in the rest of us about what the answer is. And again, Everton, you may not be the person, but.
Right, but we'll get the answer to you.
Yeah, I'm not in a rush for it, so I do know that this is all new, so I'm okay with when you can get the information to us.
Thank you.
At least for my part.
Yeah, one of the things that is evident is that what drives this is when children are being referred to for evaluation to special ed. So it's driven by referrals. And so that number may be higher or lower than what was budgeted, you know, based just on the human behaviors in between. But the number, the agencies listed 1 through 7 are essentially those organizations that have the technical support to provide
The evaluation.
psychological, psychosocial evaluations of not just our K-12, but also our preschool, preschool special ed evaluations. So essentially, these are outsourced.
Yes. But I'll get the details behind it.
Thank you.
And this is state rates. So we don't set the price, we can't negotiate the price. It's what, the fact that we do not have the specialties in-house to do this means we have to look for partners outside the institution to provide these services and essentially have them on standby for when we do have a request for an evaluation.
Somewhere down the line, I'll just put it out to Everton. If you can just pay attention to this and get it back to whomever it needs to get back to. I'd like to have some demographic works on that. The total number of students who receive these services, the units of service each student uses, and the demographics of those students. So in terms of race, in terms of gender, in terms of age, and the grades that they're in. Okay, all right, thank you.
That concludes the Finance Committee's agenda.
All right, thank you, Commissioner Powell. Again, you're leading this discussion proves that we have subject matter experts that can help guide the conversation, so it's appreciated. I would say to my colleagues that as we sort of work out this new process, we had discussed whether we would have, for lack of a better phrase, not chair people, but subject matter experts guide the conversation. I don't know at this particular point whether I will literally or figuratively turn over the gavel to that person. Vice President Elliott and Dr. Lee are going to meet and talk about the mechanics of how certain people take on certain topics. Yeah, we talked about this at our last meeting. You had said to Dr. Lee that you would get together and talk about how certain people will lead certain conversations that were formerly committee topics.
Yeah, I thought that I was going to be talking about HR stuff. I had forgot about that, and I did.
Oh no, that's all right.
Yeah,
no. We're not in any hurry. I was just making the point that, for example, and that's why we have to figure out the logistics of this, because there are little nuances. Like, for example, does the chair, I'm the chair, literally or figuratively hand over the gavel and that means does he or she begin to identify people who have questions? You know, how does that happen? And what we also discussed was we don't want this to get out of control. In other words, people aren't really chairs, because when that happens, then you got an hour, 2 hour, and then we basically back to where we started, right? Having full-blown committee meetings. So these people will not be chairs, but as president, I may say, okay, I think what we're going to try to work out is identify who are going to be the subject matter experts. Like I know Commissioner Shepard was particularly interested in policy. What types of topics will come up that she will suggest come up, how much time is allotted. All those details have to be worked out so these meetings don't become unmanageable and become separate, big, huge committee meetings where, again, we're meeting until 11 o'clock at night. So, again, Dr. Lee and Vice President Elliott and I will work out some of the logistics. We'll get back to the full board about that conversation, so we'll know exactly mechanically how this is going to work. Okay, next item on our agenda is Distinguished Educators Report and the Action Plan. Barb, do you have someone who's going to lead the last portion of our discussion?
Yep, I'm going to call on Dr. Mercedes Miller. I want to thank her and the entire team for their continued work on the plan, and thank the board for reviewing it and asking questions. So thank you. Beth?
Okay, great. So we have 4 sections that we're presenting on tonight. I'm going to do the first section representing the entire team under accountability. Then we have human capital. We have parent engagement. And so we'll keep it moving here. So I'm going to start with accountability, and also as I respond to some of the questions we received from the board. With our final submissions due in writing for these sections on Friday as the next set of drafts. Yes?
Excuse me, I just want to ask our clerk.
Okay.
I had a copy. It was delivered to my office. Is this the same one that, so it's the same one? Okay, so I don't need it.
That includes, for clarity, that includes the revisions that were due on Friday of the last two DE meetings.
So Dr. Lee, just to be clear, those revisions are included in the ones that were delivered to our homes? Okay.
But they don't, I do want to provide clarity, Shanae, Dr. Lee, that they were the revisions of the sections that we have reviewed with the board. Tonight, we're reviewing sections that the written submissions are due Friday evening. The 4 sections we're doing tonight.
Let me just clarify. So what I distributed to you all, and I asked that you only take a copy if you need a copy. I did not want to reprint for the entire day. However, what I distributed was the same.
I can't hear you. In fact, I've had trouble hearing everybody tonight.
Okay.
I wonder if the whole system's dialed too low, but can you start over again?
Sure. So what I have handed out is a copy of what you all received via courier on Friday. So if you have your packet that you received on Friday, you do not need to take an additional copy tonight. Okay?
Thank you.
Okay.
Correct. In your packet from Friday evening would not include a revision of accountability until we go through tonight. Correct. We have to go through the meeting tonight, very clearly, to go through the meeting tonight, to receive the feedback based on the questions, and then that final submission goes in on Friday.
So if you guys have extra copies, can you pass them back down? Because I brought mine from the courier and
Yeah,
that's not the same.
full stop, full stop. Just so we're clear.
Yep. I'm clear.
We had a courier.
Correct.
It was at the district expense, deliver this to our offices or our home addresses over the, I think it was Friday.
Correct.
So that we're clear, and this is the copy that I went over.
Yes.
This is not what was just distributed?
It doesn't look the same.
So let me try again, because it is
Okay.
clear about what our direction was. I feel very clear about
No,
this.
okay, all right.
Is that we submitted the entire document in December. Then we've had 3 different sessions to go over different sections of the report. We had requested from the board that we hear from all the sections before we submitted the last one on the 11th, when we asked for additional time. So we went through the different sections that were revised in writing and submitted to you on Friday. Today is to go over the additional 4 sections that we have not discussed at the dais or in a board meeting. Once we do that, our charge was then to revise it in writing and submit it by Friday as the next draft.
So my question is, what was just handed down, did that include the more recent revisions that are being discussed today? Or do you know?
I'm imagining not, because we're still talking about the original one. We're going to address Jaime's questions up here at the microphone and any questions we had from board members regarding the 4 sections this evening.
Yeah, can we take a brief recess? Because
So what you have, I am imagining, is Friday's copy of the revisions from the last sections from the last 2 board meetings.
So, but can I ask really quick? Yeah, so I'm trying to understand, and it's kind of confusing to follow along. Why would we not have a copy of what you're going to present so that we can read along and follow along? And why did we not have a copy of that delivered Friday? So essentially, we all received this packet through the courier.
Yep.
I spent my weekend reading this.
Me too.
And
Yes.
here I am, and now you're talking about a section that has been revised that we haven't read or seen, and
No.
we have,
So let me be, I'm sorry, Commissioner.
it's okay. That's
'cause I
kind
do
of what
wanna-
it's coming across, so I'm trying to
I
understand.
want to be crystal clear, because I feel like this has been the clarity I've had right along, is that we had, I know I'm repeating myself, so let me
It's
try one more
okay,
time.
I'm trying to follow along so that we can.
Okay, we submitted the entire report. We have not, the only ones we were charged with to submit the revisions for the ones that we have brought back to the board for feedback and questions you have provided. Those have been the sections that were updated in writing and provided to you on Friday night electronically and by courier, because the suggestion was it was so much to see electronically. Tonight, the 4 sections that we're reviewing, We did have a couple of board members submit questions. Jaime's questions are on here that we have not reviewed together yet. Once we review them together, like these other ones, then we put into writing the revisions, and we submit that to you on the 18th.
Right, but my question is, why didn't we have those revisions that we're going over today before
Those
today?
are, the written revisions are not due till Friday until we discuss it here.
So I think your thought process was, this was, the part that we're here to discuss today was a work in progress. It's not finished. You will use this conversation as a means by which you will provide us the newer draft. Is that right?
Particularly around these four items.
I get it.
Yeah, yeah.
Oh, go ahead.
Sorry, I just wanted to give one quick explanation. So I know Dr. Lee just passed down this sheet right here. If you just take a look at the first two, so the first white section that's dated the 10th and dated the 17th, all those sections we had a meeting on that we discussed. So what we got in the Courier was everything that they took back from our feedback from those meetings, and they gave it to us. The only reason why it aligned tonight with the last four is because we ended up pushing back the submission date. Against my will, but it was the majority, but that's okay. So that is why it wasn't in Friday's packet. So everything got put on one day when originally it was separated.
So then, can I ask, because I do apologize, I was not here for about 4 weeks, and so coming back, these topics from teaching and learning to organizational structure, where it says 1/11 submission date, what we received Friday, these are our responses? This is what we are submitting in a second draft so far?
What we got in our package Friday took us up until the second, the two columns there. This one and this one, the ones that's dated 12/10 and 12/17. That's what we have so far. Now, will that be the final submission to the commissioner? Is that what your question is?
Yeah, because when I read through this, I don't feel like the majority of this is not, for me, detailed enough in an actual action plan. It's very generically written in response. And I'll give an example. So I'm just trying to understand, like, teaching and learning, I'm just going to throw it out there. Create and implement a vision for a best first instruction, including differentiate to support, enhance, blah, blah, blah. So teachers have and demonstrate high expectations for students by effectively teaching students by using proven evidence-based practice. That doesn't tell me anything. And then I'm just trying to understand, if we're at a second draft and we're gonna go over this for the first time, when are we gonna get a final draft with an actual action plan of what we're gonna be doing and an action item that is not generically written to mean nothing? It's like saying a lot of nothing.
Well,
that's what I would like to know.
I don't know that I would agree that it says a lot of nothing, but I do agree with you.
Where's the action plan to address that actual recommendation?
Commissioner LeBron, I listened to you. I'm just asking that you just listen to my response. And it's simply that, matter of fact, I was getting ready to say, I agree with you. I went over some of this stuff over the weekend, and you can see I have a lot of edits going way back. I don't think, I'm agreeing with you, I don't think that one, Dr. Mercedes Miller finishes her presentation today, that will be the end, and we'll say, okay, here, Commissioner, here's the report. I think, and again, I'm looking at my edits, my concerns, I think there's going to be another round. It's not in the schedule, but I clearly, like you, see, and maybe other members see a need. I see one, at least one other person nodding their head, another we're going to have another stab at this. So I think what Dr. Mercedes Miller is trying to do is just finish up the last 4 areas. But you're right, or at least from your and my perspective, and I think I saw Reverend Miller nod her head, there may be a need, it certainly is a need for additional
Reverend Davis, I just want to say, you called him Reverend Miller. I'm
sorry. I told you I was going to make mistakes. Reverend Davis, there is going to be a need for additional, and we haven't scheduled that, but I agree with you. I think we will.
But here's the concern, Van. Today is, I don't even know today's date, I just showed up, but the 15th, and we have until February 8th. And they've taken all this time for this, and this is not adequate enough for us to submit. And I have major concerns about that we're running out of time. We don't have a meeting schedule. We don't know when we all will be able to meet. And I just feel like this should have been already done. Like, at this point, we should have a more detailed plan with actual action items. And it includes the board too, because I looked at our stuff, and our stuff is definitely not adequate enough, and we need to take accountability for that ourselves. But I'm just concerned that we don't have the time that we think we have to get this completed and done.
Vice President Elliott?
So this question is to Dr. Keno. Is this what we've presented, that's been presented to us, acceptable to the state at this point? And given the time constraint we're under, would we be able to come back and do some of the work that Commissioner LeBron is recommending? What's your response to that, Dr.?
If I can, let me just sort of throw something in here. I have no intention, I don't know about the rest of you all, I have no intention of submitting this. So I wouldn't even have you ask that question because it would be, I would imagine it'd be a resounding no. We are not done. Now, I recall, if you all recall, about a month ago, we talked about the fact that maybe by the 8th, is that the date, that we might not be done in time. And there might, you know, Dr. Keno even talked about the fact that that might happen. If it can be shown that we've exercised some due diligence, and Dr. Keno has said he's looking at this stuff, he's there to consult with us, give us recommendations. If it determines that notwithstanding our best efforts, some might not describe the efforts as the best, I would, we could ask for more time. We should ask for more time, because let me tell you something. First, I'm one person out of 7. I'm not submitting, as my father would say, something that's half-assed, right? I'm not, ooh, he did not say that, so I'm sorry.
That's not, no, I wanted to, for Dr. Keno to respond.
I can respond to that because the state is going to be, is the one who's going to be reviewing. In terms of the timeline, I will defer to the administration because my understanding is that the next meeting of January 24 is for the board to approve that. So we're technically talking about a week more or less to complete that. So you have to answer in terms of whether that you guys have the time. I'm looking at the administration as to put it in good shape. In terms of your comment, President White, if you think you're going to need more time, you should communicate that immediately to the commissioner. The likelihood of an extension, I doubt it. I have to say the statute actually said that this plan, you would have, the deadline to submit the plan by the statute was January 8th. And I had originally, before she set the deadline, I said, I know that's the statute, but I'm not so sure if it's going to be enough time because I knew you were working on other deadlines, another plan. So she did extend it and granted 4 more weeks to February 8th. But if you feel that way, so that it doesn't surprise the commissioner that is at the last minute, I would approach her as soon as possible.
Commissioner Powell?
So follow-on question would be, if, would such a request for an extension be better received if we submit what we have for consideration, and then essentially say, this isn't our best effort, it's just the best we could do in the time frame we have?
I would again say, if you're confident that even as a best effort, you will sign your name, I would say yes. If you're not confident, then they would say you had since November, is this your best thinking that you could have put? So that's a determination that the board and administration has to make.
So as I make my way down, let me just say that in my business, Carl and other attorneys around there know this. As you say, Dr. Keno, your best bet is to request the adjournment before it is due.
Yes.
Don't submit anything that's partially done because the court won't even consider that.
Yeah.
Right? You just got to make your request now. And as you do that, understand you need to keep on working as if the deadline is the same. Right? So, Commissioner LeBron.
So I would not be attaching my name to the report as it stands right now. I will also like to just add that there were comments and you guys know I'll be the first one to jump on reports and submit lots of questions. I had so many questions, literally on every single item, that I had to call Shanae and say, I just got out of surgery and I can't even wrap my head around this because I need to focus on healing because it was so overwhelming. And then just reading this second draft that was delivered, I didn't see that many changes, maybe a few word plays here and there, but there were also comments from the distinguished educator himself that weren't addressed in the second draft either, which was disappointing to see because there are some questions that he also is requesting a little bit more detailed action. And then even today on board docs, I saw one of the responses was we're submitting a copy of a regulation that we have, but we don't follow. That to me, I mean, all of those things, I'm just not attaching my name to as is. I also don't believe that the state is going to give us an extension. So I do think that the board and administration need to figure out what we're going to do in the next 2 to 3 weeks to get this where it needs to be so that it can be submitted. And if you guys want to go ahead and submit the request for an extension, I do strongly believe she's going to come back with a solid no, but I do think that we ourselves, with administration, need to have an action plan. And I have to be honest, this for me still really feels how we're very laxy-daisy about these types of things, and we are in a crunch and a deadline. And I think that this is a last effort opportunity for us to either show that we have what it takes to turn the district around or we don't, and then the state is going to take some action. I strongly believe that. So I think while we still have the power right now, we need to get it together.
Well, I don't think there's anybody who would disagree with you. The question is what actually we're going to do. And I don't think there are many choices here. I don't see why anybody would not try to ask for an extension, right? And we can craft something together. I'll have to speak to Barbara's staff, because as you all know, the board is not, we have, I believe, we've exercised a great degree of diligence over the governance sections. And I think they are very detailed. They're very specific. Sure, they could be reworked a little bit. I have some suggestions myself, but I think the board has really worked hard. And we are often accused sometimes of micromanaging. The sections that relate to the district and central office are not matters which the board could be expected to exercise that kind of supervision. So, but the reality is, what you're hearing from the board, or some of us, is that it's going to need some additional work. So, unless there's some objection, I'll make a request for an extension. I'll have to speak to Barbara and her staff about what might be the reasons that I could put in that request, but I will do that. All that can happen is she could say no. In the meantime, you guys are really going to have to burn the midnight oil and get this stuff done. Now, let's get done with what we say we were going to get done today. I understand what your approach was. I think that's fair. Let's do those 4 sections, and we'll proceed. Yes, Commissioner LeBron.
So I just want to add, this goes for us too, and I don't think that our response for the area, so I believe this part is ours, the governance piece for the board. Right. This goes for us too. And I'll give an example. When we were talking about, I did see that you guys put some topics on the training. None of those topics are adequate financial budgeting, understanding, and professional development. I appreciate that we at least identified 6 professional development sessions, but personally, an action plan would have been, these are the 6 dates we've identified from January to December. These are the individuals that are going to come in and train the board. These are the topics that they're going to be discussing. I think that we still have work to do, and I don't think that that falls just on Shanae's response. We as a board have to decide that. It says right there that we're going to have a process of developing a professional development plan for 2019 fiscal year by February. Well, we don't have to February 2019 because the report is due February 8th. So we should have that detailed in there, exactly what dates we're going to meet, who's going to be doing the training, and what the topics are. Just want to throw that out there. That's just one example from this whole thing for board governance.
Okay, so I think it's really essential that we accomplish what we said we were going to try to accomplish today, which is those last 4 sections. I think there will be time for board members to share their concerns about prior sections, including the board section. I would disagree with you a bit about what level of detail, dates of professional development. I don't think that's the kind of detail she's required. I think what she's going to want is a completion date, but who's going to be providing the professional development on financing, the time, the location, that stuff takes a lot of time, and we would never get this thing done if we had to have all that level. But we can talk about that, and if there's some way that as a board member, you could provide some of that level of detail. And again, you got to remember, the commissioner knows that these things, you got to have contracts for this stuff. You got to be able to select the right vendor. We can't just be saying, oh, Joe Blow is going to be doing this professional development thing, and there might be 6 other vendors out there who might provide some. So that, I think she's been a superintendent. This stuff takes time. So I think the completion, how it's set up now, and I think Dr. Aquino approved this format, which was recommendation, action item, responsible person, resources needed, project completion date. That in and of itself is pretty detailed. Who exactly is going to provide the professional development and on what date, the location, I don't think that's the kind of need, but we can talk about that at another time. Tonight, we have to do those last 4 sections. So I'd ask that you go ahead and.
Okay.
Brianne, I'm sorry, Beth. Hold on one second.
Problem.
I do want to add, though, that you're saying at another time, and I, as a commissioner, as another board member, as a colleague, need to know from you as the board president, what other time is that? And I would like to identify that other time before this meeting ends and after Beth is done, so that we know as a board when we're going to come back to discuss actual action items around that.
That's fine. After Beth finishes her presentation, we can poll board members, they can pull out their calendars, and we can figure out the next meeting date. I don't have any problem with that.
Okay, and then I just want to add that you can give a level of detail without the contracts for who, but finance, which was discussed heavily throughout the Distinguished Educators Report, isn't even a topic for us to get training on. And that needs to be included there. That's all I'm saying. We don't have to have the person identified. If it was me, I would want that information, but we can at least identify the 6 dates that we're gonna have the professional development and the topics that we're gonna be discussing and figure out who later on, and we can put that in there. But I don't think as it's written, very generically written, it's gonna be acceptable. It's not for me, so.
As I indicated, Commissioner Braun, I held it up. You can look at my copy. That's the board governance. You can see my little scripts and so I think there's changes that need to be made. No one's debating that. I agree. But Dr. Aquino, after he finishes, we really got to finish these 4. Go ahead.
I have to agree with the comments made by Commissioner LeBron, because if you put six dates, you know, I could, as a reader, I could say, are those 6 dates happening October or November? Which is very different than if they are spread throughout the year in terms of the thought that goes in terms of we're doing this topic in this month for a reason, as opposed to doing at the end of the year, or we're just trying to comply and put the 6 topics and we're going to do it at the end of the year. In terms of resources, even if you don't have the specific date, but say in September, we're going to address this topic. In October, we're going to address, and in the column of the resources, even if you don't know the specific name of the individual, but if you have, we're going to contract with entities such as the New York State Association of School Board, or we're going to go this and this type of organization, or we have a commissioner who's really good in this topic, who's going to lead us, just gives a different level of confidence that there's been some thought around, because it's not, I don't think you're going to be evaluated only in what is in writing. The writing reflects the strategic process that was put into the plan, and that's what I think they're going to be looking at.
So, and I had indicated to somebody I was going to say this. Dr. Aquino, and maybe I misunderstood you, but you have had a copy of this draft. I assume it was sent to you on Friday. I hope, like the rest of us, you are providing real-time comments, because you're a member of the board, right? You're not only a consultant, you're a member of the board. I do not want to see us in a situation where we could have gotten your advice and counsel, like we're getting it tonight, and to have this thing submitted, and then we find out, wait a second, sorry, and I want to be honest about this, because I think this is what Commissioner LeBron is talking about, and the whole community is talking about it. We see people from the New York State talking about what they're going to do if we don't do X, Y, and Z. So let me be clear about this. If there is deficiencies, as Commissioner LeBron has identified, and you apparently have agreed, if there are deficiencies, you are a member of this Board of Education. I'm assuming that you are going to provide the same kind of input as you just did now in real time. So, you know, you've had this thing since Friday. My hope is that you would provide the same kind of analysis that Commissioner LeBron and others would have. Is that not a reasonable expectation?
So first, and we have to clarify with the commissioner in terms of my role as a board member. I'm a non-voting board member in submitting this. But let me be clear, because I wasn't planning on saying this publicly, but Commissioner LeBron just mentioned something which is very true. I provided feedback throughout this entire process. I put questions on the first draft, and like she said, the second draft came, and those questions were not addressed. And I have met with individuals. I put my offer, but I am not here to impose myself. I've said, I'm here to help. I cannot write the plan.
Absolutely not.
But I've said, come to me, and people have come, but I am available to provide guidance. But it comes to a point that you provide guidance and give feedback, and if it's not taken into consideration, there's not much I can do. So I can tell you, I've been really open, and I roll up my sleeve in helping. And you can ask the staff, but if it's not taken into consideration, there's nothing I can do.
Well, let me just say, and I know Commissioner Hallmark has a comment. Let me just say, if this report refers extensively to the board president, and I think based on your recommendations, that a lot of stuff that needs to happen, based on your report, should be funneled through the board president. Now, let me say to you, I'm saying for the record, because I know what folks in Albany have said, what might happen. Let me be very clear about this. If you find anybody, particularly my colleagues who have elected me, put me in a position of responsibility, who is not doing what you say, what you've recommended they do, I would ask that you do what you would expect any one of these other colleagues to do. Let me know. If somebody is not being responsive, whether it's someone who reports to Barbara, and again, you could obviously talk to Barbara about that too, but I can only speak for myself. If somebody is not doing provide the recommendations, and as Commissioner LeBron pointed out some deficiencies in terms of things that you had asked for and weren't responded to, and then you just confirmed that a second ago, let me know. I ask that of you, because I don't want us to get ourselves in a situation where we have not taken your advice and counsel, which everybody appreciates and respects here, and then we find ourselves in a situation where, again, let's be honest about this. We have people from the state of New York saying what's going to happen if we don't, and this is what Commissioner LeBron is talking about, if we don't do right. So I'm going to need you to do what the report says. What you had recommended is come to the board president and let me know where we're dropping the ball. I'm sorry, Commissioner Hallmark.
So let me just offer, since I was the former chair of governance, that I will offer to go over the governance section in particular with a fine-tooth comb and write down some ideas and suggestions and more specifics in the governance section. Invite anybody else who wants to look over that with me and then meet with you to take a look at it, if others are fine with that.
But I would also say, in terms of the board in general, had to play a more active role, not only in the governance, but in the writing and supervision of the plan. So it's not only me. I'm just here as a support, but has the board been involved? So as board president, vice president, or commissioner, have you been involved in looking at the people? Let me meet with the point person. Where are we? What are the challenges? What feedback has Jaime given? Where are we? That, I'm not so sure if that has happened from the board.
Yeah, I would agree. So my suggestion to do that in the governance section, I would hope that other folks would look at some other sections and offer to do the same.
Commissioner Shepard?
So I just want to say, I don't want to go back and forth, but it kind of frustrates me to now hear this, coming from you, Dr. Aquino, when we're constantly told that we can't micromanage and that meeting with people is us overreaching and you know, I've expressed the fact that we have a short amount of time and we shouldn't have pushed back the date to see the first draft, because then we could have had these questions weeks ago and would have known that we needed to make some changes. And I mean, that wasn't what the majority wanted to do. And it just frustrates me now that we're sitting here on the 15th and we're being told that, you know, that you hope that we've been more hands-on, that we've been doing all these things, when the conflicting narrative has been that we shouldn't do that and that we should wait and we should follow this schedule right here. And I'm extremely frustrated because I don't want to have to ask for an extension. That's one. And the second thing is that we were given a short amount of time, which is fine. But if we had commissioners that are willing to go in and help, like the word micromanaging is so negative. That's not what this is about. This is about us trying to uplift this district and get in something that the state wants to see. And so I just want to say that that's very frustrating to me. Now we're sitting on the 15th and we're talking about asking for an extension when I know I've been one that's been very vocal about are these recommendations or are they mandatory? Like if they're recommendations, that means to me that we have an option to do something here. We have an option to do something there. And this whole process has, and I hate to use this word, but I feel like it has been a sham for me, that this whole process that we've put together we've put together these things, we're right up on the end, now we're gonna ask for an extension, and then you can sit here and say, well, I hope that commissioners were doing this or that and third. That frustrates my spirit.
Well, let me just respond to that, because if you remember Commissioner Shepard, in one of the meetings, I actually clarified what I meant by making the distinction between hands-on and hands-off. And I gave an example of when I said the difference between management and governing, that you should be governing through the superintendent and holding the superintendent accountable. And in my report, it mentions that that is the role that the officer, particularly the president, should be having, and should having one-on-one meetings in terms of meeting with the superintendent, say, where are we? And having regular standing meetings. How are we doing? What are the challenges? Then informing the board, here are the issues that are going through. That has been pointed out. I gave it, particularly if you remember, I think it was Commissioner Hallmark or somebody that gave an example of going to Kansas. And I gave and fleshed that out in terms of what the role of the board would look like. It's not just like, if you remember, just saying, well, we want to go to Kansas, let the superintendent decide everything. I said, no. You know, it's like, okay, how are you going to get us to Kansas? Show us the map. What are the strategy? What are the milestones? That has not happened from this board here, and something that the board is supposed to be submitting. And I gave those examples. I just cannot continue telling the board what to do. It's not my role, but that was clear. So it's not that you should have been hands up, and I would not consider that micromanaging.
So, and I understand that, but I just wanted to double back and say that what has been in the report is that there has been an issue of accountability and with us working together with the superintendent. So knowing that going in and knowing we have a short amount of time, I can't focus on if the majority of the board is going to hold the superintendent accountable and talk to the superintendent. My focus is that I have to sign my name to something that's about to go to the state. And I've been getting told in so many words to sit down, allow them to give us something. And here we are again on the 15th with something that is not up to where we should be at this point. And that's no dig on administration, because I, as an individual commissioner, I'm here to help. And I've been saying that from the beginning. And even if that goes beyond the superintendent, who we know is transitioning out at the end of this month, like that's our role. Like that's our role in this moment. And I do understand when you're talking about management in the future beyond that, but we're in a crisis right now. And like, I'm going to be doing all I can, but it just frustrates me to hear that someone will go on the record and say, well, I hope hope that the commissioners were meeting with the point people, but then this whole time we were told that that's not what we should be doing. And I just wanted to make that very clear, that that's where I stand right now, is in a mode of frustration around this whole thing.
But for example, when the first meeting happened, you know, I got the sense from the entire board that the board was not pleased with that first meeting. Is that correct? So this board, and I'm looking at President White, did the President White or did something after in terms of following up? I don't know if somebody went to Superintendent Dean Williams and said, you know what, I need a plan. So what's going to happen? Somebody had to do that. And here's what the board expects next time. And here is the plan. So that's one thing that you need to consider.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
No, so I just want to add, because Commissioner Hallmark offered to do the board governance piece, and I feel like the entire governance section is the responsibility of all 7 commissioners. And I don't want to waste time. Not saying that you're going to waste our time. Let me just be clear about that. Of you going to do the work and then only 1 or 2 other additional, and then we all 7 get together, and then 4 of us can't agree. I feel like we should all be sitting at the table to discuss the entire governance piece. And then if we get to that section and you want to lead that section because you have chaired governance and you have some structure for professional development for the entire board, I would support that. But I think that the work with the entire board governance piece it requires all 7 of us to be there and be in agreement. The other thing I will add is that in reading the first draft again, you know, I was very disappointed with the first draft. Again, I feel like the responses were too generically written and not enough detailed of actual action and steps that were going to be taken. But I do want to say, Van, that Jaime's recommendations, Dr. Aquino's recommendations and questions were in there from the first to the second. And when I read it, I saw that nothing's been updated or answered in regards to the first draft. So I don't need Jaime to come to me and tell me that this wasn't done when I can clearly read it from the first draft to the second. His comments were in there in red, bold, by the clerk, purposely so that we knew that those were recommendations or questions or add-ons from Dr. Aquino for us to be able to distinguish where that came from. So I just want to put that out there. And I do think that what Dr. Aquino is saying is that based on the first draft, that at that point, you as the board president should have met with Barbara Dean. I want to be very clear, this is my take on what he's saying, and said to Barbara, this is unacceptable. And by the time we get to the second draft, even before they come with this schedule to present based off topics, all of these things need to be updated because this is unacceptable to the board as a whole based off of our meeting.
So let me be clear about this, and none of you would know this. I did make that very clear. Matter of fact, not only did I make that very clear in this meeting, because I was one of those people that talked about in a politically correct way, but I made it very clear that I was not satisfied, and other people did too. Barbara and I have talked about this. So again, let's be careful about talking about stuff that you're not aware of, and you wouldn't. I wouldn't have necessarily told you. But I did speak to Barbara about that. And also, let me just be clear, not to put anybody on the spot, but my understanding is that Dr. Massetti Miller has been meeting with Dr. Aquino, right? And my understanding, so I think there might be more miscommunication than maybe we're having the opportunity to reveal at this time. So I'm going to tell you, and we all probably can improve our game. It sounds like a lot of people were trying, but maybe should try differently, including myself, Dr. Aquino, Beth Massetti Miller, because what I'm hearing from Barbara and what Barbara has been telling me is she has been meeting with Dr. Aquino. Yeah. Now, why that stuff hasn't ended up in the report and the changes that you and I agree, because again, I'm like you, I got it Friday and I was looking through it and I still feel like there's work to be done. So rather than continue to beat ourselves up, which is our pattern, we've identified a problem. Let's not spend the next 20, 30, 40 minutes keep on talking about the problem. We know what the problem is. All of us, every single one of us, Dr. Hallmark has suggested that she's willing to step up. I don't think she was saying, I'll just do it all. She's just willing to volunteer. Dr. Aquino can do his job differently. I can do my job differently. Dr. Miller can do it. Massetti Miller can do her job differently. Let's begin that process by Beth you don't mind me calling you Beth, doing the 4 items that we talked about for today. Let's move forward.
So, and that's, I'd just like to say that, again, I want to adhere to the process, because the decision about the process, the timing, what is going to be updated, I sat most of the day watching what's being presented tonight, as well as the adjustments that are still in process. Dr. Mercedes Miller is meeting. We have our interim and our new incoming chief of staff that have copies. So what I'd like to do, Beth, is again, I know people are anxious to see the whole product, but it's being, I mean, it's consuming pretty much every day. The entire team is spending most of the day, and we're getting updates every single day, several times a day, and sitting together for hours. So could you just start by 2 minutes about the process, because what they're seeing is the schedule, which was agreed to, not the complete documents that are in process. Thank you.
So just for,
These are not the documents you're presenting?
so a little bit of clarity. Let me just try a little bit, and I'm sure you'll still have more questions, but let me just give a little bit. So yes, you got the second draft. It is not done. I am going to say that. The expectation wasn't that it would be done, but that we're on drafts. And the more you go through a document like this, is that the deeper it gets. It is a huge document. So I think around, and I know we talked about this in the beginning, is the level of expectation around the detail. And I think that is something that we should come to clarity on either individually or as a board and come back to me, because every one of these items you could spend one whole board meeting on, okay? Because there's so much behind each one. So an action item might say, developing an implementation plan, and you'll see that a lot in the report, because it caused us to go back and say, okay, how are we doing this? And it wasn't satisfactory based on Dr. Aquino's responses to say, we're doing this and we're going to improve it. He pushed us to go back in his different conversations to say, that's not satisfactory. For example, some of the things I'll address tonight. Like, in other words, the revision is, we're going to develop a performance management plan that engages in rigorous professional development on best practice. I know it sounds, but all of that, and that is a big deal. That's about the accountability. And then behind that you won't see here, but you would hold us responsible to, is by that completion date that the superintendent would then be sharing with the board that indeed I had developed that and monitored it and presented it back to the superintendent. So it's an ongoing process. And one last thing is that we realized too, when we went through this document, there are some things that overlap. So sometimes you could, some of it might be in another section, we're going to refer back and forth. But our job is to continue to find the coherence in this document, to be able to continue to message it from what we see from the working side of it, and to express to the community the coherence of all our work. And we talked about this today, is what does the final document look like so it's digestible, because this has been the working document. What does it look like that's digestible? And then begin to attach all the documents that we have, and then build from there and connect it to our district improvement plan, our strategic action plan, and all the other plans we have. Because what we realize is when you start to write these, you see it over in, for example, special education improvement plan, or you see it over here in a Bell's improvement plan, or you see it in different places. So we want to say, for example, if we see one section, we know that appears in several different places across the district. That being said, is that how do you put that in a concise manner and still make sure that the board feels comfortable enough that it answers the question to get us to begin to start the work on those different topics.
Dr. Mercedes Miller.
Yeah, let me just say,
I don't know if that helps.
I think this is an opportunity to, at this point, to do what Commissioner LeBron is suggesting.
Okay.
That we use this as a work session, so if we start with school climate number 1, you have an action item statement here. So here's an opportunity for this board to say some of the other specific things that need to be included in this action item.
Yes.
So I think if we went line by line and included that kind of specific action item information, I think that that would be very helpful for this board and would give you the kind of direction that you need in order to bring back to us some specifics.
One of the things, Commissioner, can I say a little bit about that, is that some of the questions that we got, we could begin to address it. So the board questions that came to us is part of our job tonight, not only to address Dr. Aquino's questions, but for example, the board questions, so we could get up here and could stand up here and then respond to those questions.
Yeah, but what we're saying, excuse me for interrupting,
okay,
but what
no
we're saying is that needs to be, we need to see it. It needs to be documented here. So if you had those questions, what I'm hearing Commissioner LeBron says, then those answers to that should have been in here, right? So let me just give you an example.
Okay.
We will work to continue, we will continue to work with our school climate advisory partners on a monthly basis in order to build trust and improve school climate. What does that tell me? See, that doesn't say anything. So there needs to be some specifics. So that's what, I'm hoping that, this forum will help us to be able to do, is to respond to the questions, these action steps that Commissioner LeBron is referring to, and I think that will be helpful to the State Education Department that we have, because I've been here long enough to know that we've had these kinds of plans, particularly around the discipline plans that have this kind of language, but very little gets done. And so there has to be some accountability. We can hold the district accountable, particularly with this plan, if we've got specifics, and it's lacking that. But we have an opportunity to work at it now.
Commissioner Shepard.
So I have literally been saying that since the first day, and the majority of this board did not want to do it line by line. And so I'm going to put out there that since we're here already, that I would just like to hear what Dr. Beth has for us, because right now we're just too late, and I just want to hear what you got, and then we can go from there. So that's just me as an individual commissioner. But I have literally been saying we should go line by line from the beginning of when we first got this document, and that was not what the majority of the board wanted to do.
Well, and the reality is, consistent with Commissioner Shepard has said, we don't have your work. So as I've said previously, go ahead, make your presentation.
Yep.
Okay, and then, so I'm going to respond. I'm on accountability, and it did have some overlap with organizational structures. So the first question, we had planned to respond to the questions that we had, and the first question was from Dr. Aquino on item number 1 in accountability, is there a performance management team? Why has the review found a lack of system? He found a lack of system in the accountability, and so on and so forth. So I went back, looked at our responses, and my response was too general and didn't answer the question. So we reflected, wrote again, and the decision is that we will design a performance management plan and implementation plan that has common protocols, develops common language, and is transparent for the community, the board, and for ourselves. So that includes having, like I said, common protocols, a common management system for establishing goals, a structured way in which to monitor that, and quarterly reports that show that we have indeed done those pieces. So those plans could be around the DE report. So that's how we would begin to establish goals and metrics for every department, for the reports that are critical to the district, that we will have a monitoring team on a regular basis, a cross-functional team, and that they will be reported out with transparency. And the other thing we reported the last time too is that we were doing customer service surveys and other surveys that would be incorporated into the management team's monitoring of the systems.
So let's just go to implement a protocol where you are, and
okay.
What structures will be in place to monitor?
You're going to have a plan.
So what does that look like?
So it will look like a cross-functional team. First, we need to have a clear understanding of what the performance management team will do. So we have to set a clear mission for the team. Its function, what is it going to do? So it's not just there to say we have a performance management team. It needs to have clear understanding of best practices around that. And then the goals and structures that are established for the district in different departments, and then how are they reported out and monitored. So the plan has to clearly identify that. I will say we are doing some of that, but it's not, according to Dr. Kino's report, that was not satisfactory. So we need to go back out, look for best practices, look perhaps for a consultant, look for software. We are currently talking to our IM&T department about how does this get monitored in a very open way, also digitally, to understand where we are. That answer?
I don't think that's going to be acceptable, but I don't want to get caught up into.
So the plan, though, the plan, though, I will say, is where the devil in the detail is that we have to hold ourselves accountable to what I put in the answer here.
Right, can I just add, though, my only concern, anywhere in this report where the superintendent is mentioned, we're talking about someone who hasn't been hired and is not here. We have an exiting superintendent, a transitional team coming in, which we can't expect that they're gonna be responsible for this entire piece of it. And so I think there are areas where really clearly it should have been defined, individuals who are already in these positions to do this work regardless of who the face of the superintendent is. So Beth, you started out your opening stating that some of it is really, a lot of these responses are we're going to create a plan, we're going to create this other plan, we're going to align plans. So I'm with Commissioner Elliott on this. I don't think that that's going to be enough or acceptable, but even saying that this is going to be in writing and then the superintendent's going to hold us accountable to do it. Well, we don't know who that superintendent is. And then that superintendent has to come in and get familiar with the district and then get to par. And so I see that the projected date is September 2018 to February 2019. That's just one section of this entire report.
So in terms of time, I'm just clarifying, not pushing back, is that we did talk about this actually today, is about timelines, because there are some in here that we should say the timeline to be determined by the permanent superintendent. Because there are some actions in here about structuring different pieces that is going to wait for the permanent superintendent, unless the board feels something different should happen. So I want to say that. And I get about the plan. We did begin to start to say in this report that we have structures, here's who's on the team, and that the feedback was that wasn't a satisfactory response. The feedback was, I'm just going to be candid, that's not working. So you need to go back, you need to look at best practice, and you need to develop a better, more in-depth plan about what to do. So the reason why, in terms of that doesn't mean what we're doing now stops, or that we're not trying to improve it, but there are things that we have to do and put in writing that we're held accountable to create a better performance management system in the district, which has been the common concern. We recognize that we need to improve it. I want to say one more thing. There are two things about the timeline, is that, and this is another thing we talked about, and then I want to talk about transparency, is that does the date indicate when you make the plan or when you start to implement the plan? So we had to get clarity on, it doesn't mean I drafted the plan in February. It means if I put a date there, it's in implementation phase. So there also had to be clarity about what does a date mean. And the last thing is we talked about today is how do we monitor this transparently? So the accountability so that it stays alive is that how do we put it forward facing, not only for the board, but for the community, because listening to the comments the other evening is that they want to know where we're at and how do we then monitor these timelines, red light, green light, yellow light, if you will, about where we are.
Could you do me a favor? All right.
I'm going
Could you speak into the mic?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Thanks.
Yeah, but
okay.
For example,
okay.
What's the performance management team? See, there needs to be a definition and the role of this team. You know, what do they do? I mean, there's very, in my view, very little descriptive information in here that leaves me still with, even more questions.
I could put more. So for this, I don't know if it would be adequate, but let me just try, is that we can add more description about what actually should be in the plan as we write it more deeply. Again, we have certain protocols, we have a team, we have some description of that, but it needs to be deeper based on this feedback to do a more complete understanding of it.
Dr. Massetti-Miller, and you answer the question, a part of this, but do you have the recommendation there?
So I have the recommendation.
Can you read the recommendation?
Implement a protocol whereby all supervisors, support coach, and health directors responsible, accountable, and department supervisors must provide regular, meaningful, timely feedback.
Now, with the response that you have there and answering the question that I put, do you feel that that response matches completely my recommendation?
Well, if I look at it, it says if there is a performance management team, which we are going to have, why is it that a review found a lack of system of accountability? So we went back and said, okay, what does that look like? And we're describing how the district will implement the protocol to coach, develop, and hold staff accountable. And we're using a performance management system to do that.
Because what I need you, because the response focuses a lot on accountability. And accountability was just a minor part. That it talks a lot about there was a lack of support. And remember that one of the things that I said, that you cannot understand the recommendation, I said that in the previous meeting, in absence of the finding. And one of the things that I said was that there was a lack of support and development and coaching in the district. Obviously, lack of accountability too. So there has to be, and this is not only at the performance management team level, just supervisor to direct report at all level. What are they doing to develop, which will help other of the recommendation, which is building the talent and the bench, and how do you regularly meet and provide meaningful and timely feedback that is not necessarily in a punitive way, but is to grow the leaders. That I'm not so sure if it's captured in what you described.
I can add those comments and revise it.
Commissioner Powell?
Yeah, my thinking was very much along the lines of what I just heard, that a performance management team is one function here at central office, but the accountability we're looking for is at every level of the organization. And the question is, at every level, if I don't do my job, so what, right? If I, as an administrator in a school who's responsible for supervising X number of teachers, and I do it in a very perfunctory way. I get the evaluations in on time, but I don't actually have a relationship with my teachers, so what? What is the so what? Well, their own evaluation should be based not just on the quantifiable how many evaluations did you turn in, but what are you doing to improve the relationship with your subordinates? What are you doing to develop your subordinates? Now, granted, if those things are in the evaluations, then they get addressed. So this isn't so much a problem of whether we do or don't have a performance management team. It's how seriously do we take our entire evaluation system, because that's where the accountability that every individual person in this district is held, not whether they turn in a quarterly report, right? Not whether the report goes to the Deputy of Administration and Strategic Partnerships. We're talking about a culture. Like, you got a whole category on school climate, but we don't have a category that speaks to the climate of job accountability, up up and down the entire chain. I think that, does that get to your point?
I mean, perhaps
And
it
so
is coming to.
focusing on a performance management team kind of misses the mark.
I will say that perhaps we need to define accountability so we have a common language for that. And what does it mean in terms of the whole, what are we accountable for? Are we accountable for making sure if part of the goal is to make sure or to foster a collaborative department that works on the best interests of children? Yes, right? But what I have found and what I thought permeated the report, so certainly we can make these tweaks, and that's why we're having the discussion, is what is accountability? And we can say we want something to be better, but then how do we know it's better? And how do we have that common understanding among ourselves to measure it?
Let me just recommend this. In reading the recommendation, it would seem to me that you would have some things in the action items like, I think Commissioner Powell was talking about it, maybe evaluations, but also academic information, you know, reading levels, other academic levels. You would have that kind of information in the action item. The data is, you know, that you're going to follow, that the data that we get in the leadership meetings, that's some information. You know, if we're talking about, you know, we talk a lot about attendance rates. You know, are we, you know, how are we holding, you know, the schools, in this case, using that as an example, accountable in order to get attendance rates up, for example, or graduation rates. You know, something to that effect is what I'm thinking you need to, something more substantive, substantive around data. Metrics. It's what I'm thinking should also be included in that action item. Now, exactly what that is, I mean, that's, you know, that the wording has to be, I really think that this wording misses it. I think that wording needs to just be removed and include, you know, some information around the data. Okay. But maybe I'm missing something.
No, that's good feedback, and we can go back and make sure, well, work to respond to the feedback that we got. Mm-hmm. But we can talk a little bit more, Dr. Kino, if that's okay, and just clarify what we're looking to hold each other accountable to in this particular item. Okay. Is that, and I'm going to tell you right now that it's going to permeate the next 3 pieces. Create and implement a professional development plan to equip all district staff with use on data to drive decisions. I think that a little bit, in going back to the plan, there are a couple of pieces here, is talking about, we had mentioned the last time about having a professional development plan, particularly around for our principals and building staff, around how to use data to improve instruction, but also at the central office level, how do we use data to make decisions. And so we had said that we would be building those structures for that to occur. His response is a professional development plan to equip all staff. So it was twofold, something for the building level that we had talked about the last time from the Office of Accountability using best practices, but also internally, how are we using data, and that was part of the training related to staff in the other one. Maybe that's not quite on track, but I will go back and cross-check from the report. The next one is establish a process to communicate.
But can you see, I'm sorry,
can
you see why I put that question? If you look at the action item, compare the action item to the actual recommendation and see if it actually matches.
So it says, how will the district create and implement a professional development plan?
Yeah.
Is that the one we're on?
Well, yeah.
Okay.
The recommendations that
That was an
create and
easy one.
implement a professional development plan to equip all district staff to use data to drive decision. And the response was the district is rich in data and has been providing professional learning sessions on the actionable use of it, as we have more targeted and exhaustive data available to all districts. Stakeholder professional learning through all layers of the system will be provided. So it doesn't really describe.
Correct.
That's
So,
what.
correct. And
And
so
that's what I want
tonight's
you to really
response
think.
is much more specific around
Yes.
creating a professional development plan for schools as one around data to drive instruction, which we're thinking about a different approach, a different anchor text for that, and holding the Office of Accountability to develop that. Go ahead, Barb.
One of the questions I have is whether it would be helpful to have the anchor texts, okay? So when we did the 100-day plans, we anchored in the text so that people knew what the foundational best practice was. Most of the anchor texts, whether we're going to use Bernhard or someone else, have the PD plans models, which then can be aligned with the rest of the report. So I guess my question would be to Dr. Keno, is that something that you think would be helpful, just because it drives then to the specific steps in providing professional learning in an organization from the district office to the classroom?
Yeah, that will be one of the resources. I think the state would be interested in knowing how the professional development plan will be created, how will be implemented, how will be monitored, because the district is rich in data.
Correct.
It has been providing
Correct.
professional development, but has not translated to a data-driven decision-making culture. So what will be different in terms of like, we're going to do 10 sessions, we're going to do this through a team of teachers that will be identified in each school district. During the superintendent's conference, they're going to be released to train. That's like the professional development plan.
So the grain size, and the reason, Beth, that you're doing this, the grain size then is akin to the plans we did for the RISE school and the receivership schools. So that's what I'm trying to get a sense of, is the grain size, because taking then the steps, then you can move it to the months, the who, the when, for each recommendation. So I think that helps to have that level of clarity, because it's continuing to go through those layers. So I'm trying to just get a sense for process, because to get to that grain size, you have to have certain people in the room that can think at that grain size, okay?
And
It's a
Dr.
match.
Miller and I talked about that. You can say, here's the protocol on how we're going to create the plan. And that protocol will include different stakeholders. And these are the stakeholders that are going to be involved in creating the plan. And the elements of the plan will include these components. And that plan will be completed by June of 2019. And then that's the first milestone, even though you don't have that grain size of the anchor text and everything, but you have the process they're going to use to create and implement the plan described.
We were taught in school, you use the who, what, when, where, and why.
Yes.
So if you can respond to these questions based on the who, what, when, where, and why, that would be very helpful.
Okay.
I also think putting it in a bullet type of format, almost if you had a blank and you could check mark it, done. Done. I mean, some of this, and this was part of my concern about the prior sections that I thought needed to be revised, is they're sometimes generic statements about what you plan to do, but you don't describe how you plan to do it, such that if you accomplished it, you'd be able to say, check, done. I do think that, for example, the board responses lend themselves to that kind of response. Check, check. So I would ask that you consider, because the problem when I look at this, some of the stuff, it's like one long narrative, right?
Yes.
And it does sort of lend itself to the accusation that it's a description of what you're going to do, not specific, because this column is action items.
Yes, and
So-
I do want to say, yes, I agree with the way it formatted in terms of the draft. I think that when we looked at how we would submit it in its final form, it would have more akin to that, to get to
But
that.
you're going to have to get there sooner than later.
Yep.
Because, again, in terms of working with Dr. Aquino and with the entire board, if you had something that specifically had a line by it where you could check it, said, we'll do X, Y, and Z, I could tell in my mind whether that was I would think that was a specific action step.
The only thing we did agree to, I thought, is that we would do the line by line, that it was in its totality, because then it could be, just for feedback, it depends on how detailed you would get within it, so that it could bullet it, but you put your end date, according to Dr. Aquino, for the implementation, versus the plan itself would include the different target dates, but the big piece where you would measure it and give it a green light is at its point of implementation. Just some feedback.
I would suggest that, again, my colleagues have offered some specific examples, but I would suggest how you format this will make it easier for you to, for people to perceive and understand what specifically you're going to do.
Can I just add to, not just us, Van, the state has to read this and have an understanding of what we're talking about and exactly what we're doing. And that example that was just read, I'm telling you, when I was reading this, I was angry because I feel like when I was at MCC, and I know you don't like my analogies, but they make sense if you can follow along, Van. When I was at MCC as a first-year student, and I was struggling to write my first paper, and they would ask you a question, students do this. You take that question and you answer that question by adding all of the same words that they just asked you, and that gives you a little bit of extra words and padding in your paper. Now, I'm just throwing that out there because it literally feels like here is the recommendation. They took the recommendation and padded it with a few more words, but literally repeated the recommendation within their response. And this goes throughout. Me personally, right now, I don't want to sit here and have Beth go through line by line for 4 more columns where I know the entire 4 next sections are not adequate enough. They're not detailed enough. There's no actual action items in there. So personally, tonight, I would rather that we adjourn this meeting and allow them to go and actually create real action items and a response to all of these sections to give them that extra time. But I think as a board, before we leave, we need to figure out a few more dates that we need to meet to discuss the entire thing, and then our board governance piece as well.
I do want to say one thing, Commissioner, and absolutely we will take the charge and do that. We did agree to this format in the beginning. I think the iterations and looking at it and what made sense in the beginning versus what makes sense now does feel different, but I do want to say at some level, we agreed on this format in the beginning.
Yeah, so
I totally take the feedback about how to improve it.
And I don't want to be beating up on you, Beth, because this is not on you. And I'm going to second what Commissioner Shepard said. The board majority, I was also under the support of us going line by line and requested the meeting immediately for this board to discuss this report as a board, which we tried to do. Me and Commissioner White went back and forth on that. Remember that, White? That's in the video. So I was also in support of us going line by line so that we all had an understanding of what the recommendation was and what the expectation would be, so that in the first draft of the response, before we got to that first draft. But we did not, Commissioner Shepard and I have the board majority for that. So here we are. And again, it's the 15th. The final report is due the 8th. I don't feel hopeful that we're going to get an extension, especially hearing that this is already written, that the recommendation should have been done by January 8th, the response, and that the commissioner from the state gave us the February 8th and gave us an additional 30 days. So I just want us to figure out how we're going to move forward at this point with less time.
So there is a recommendation from Commissioner LeBron. Again, no disrespect intended, Dr. Massetti Miller. And I just want to know what my colleagues are thinking about it. She suggested that rather than, and I would agree with your characterization, I think it's all pretty much written the same format. Depending on your individual assessment, it may be productive, therefore, to go through it. Or we ask you, you've heard exhaustively, I think, some of the suggestions for reformatting and adding more detail in terms of the action plan. What are my colleagues' wishes? I mean, she makes a suggestion. I think it's a rational one. People may want to just continue to go through it, but I'm soliciting your comments. And by the way, either way, the reality is we're going to have to figure out at the end of this meeting when we're going to meet again to talk about this. And while, you know, it's often, I'm often accused of being a person who talks about the glass is half full rather than half empty. There is some water in the glass, thanks to the work of the administration. We're just obviously going to have to fill that a little more. The question is when.
That's fine.
What do you guys think about sort of ending this meeting now, letting the administration, Barbara and I, we have a leadership meeting tomorrow morning. We've already whispered that we'll probably cut that meeting in half and begin to sort of talk about this as we have before, and see how we can revise. And at the end of this meeting, we could talk about scheduling another meeting. We were going to have to do that anyways, folks.
And it would be several meetings.
Well, perhaps so, perhaps so.
I agree with Commissioner LeBron.
All right, Commissioner Powell?
My only reservation is this. If we're just not going to talk about any more of the line by line, if we were just going to suspend discussion of the line by line, I only want to know if Beth or whoever else is responding to the other sections on HCI and parent engagement, whether there's a thorough understanding of where you're going to go from here, what you need to do to improve the document, because if you don't have the feedback you need, I mean, maybe you do on the accountability, maybe we beat that one to death already, but what about the HCI? Does Harry know what he needs to do to bring greater clarity to his section?
So I think based on this, it would be good for us to go back and absorb, talk together, see what makes the most sense, and maybe perhaps provide an example for people to respond to see if it has the right grain size, the right idea about how, if you feel like that's an acceptable response based on the recommendation. I mean, that's one option, that I could go back and do this in a format based on the feedback and give it back as a sample for people just to respond to see if that's the general direction that people feel the format should be. Because I think the content is getting there. I think it's how much we describe it. Having a common voice in this document is something that Dr. Aquino and I have talked about as we begin to pull it together. So that's just a suggestion.
Well,
go ahead.
I just have to
No?
disagree with what you
Okay.
said. In terms of making progress, if we just look at the accountability that we just talked about, the accountability is up and down the entire chain. The performance management team doesn't get you there, right? So I'm not clear that you do have a sense of where
Perhaps.
we need to go.
I think based on and that could be, from your perspective, I totally understand, but based on the feedback, and we can go back, I can talk to Dr. Aquino and get more feedback on some of the content. I offer that as a suggestion.
Commissioner LeBron?
No, I just want to add that the rest of the sections, the response is generally the same. They're very generically written with no actual action steps and items for us to view. I just want to clarify, it's not that I need granular grain level. I think that as a board, we have to understand that the state has to review this and has to have an understanding of what we're doing or what we have been doing and what we're going to do differently. And I don't think that anything in this entire report currently, including our section as a board, accurately reflects that we've thought about this and that we've said these are the changes we're going to implement, and here's why. I would even say that you can add in there, if you're going to add something that you feel strongly that we're already doing, but it made it into the recommendations, that you demonstrate why that system, you want to keep it, what you've identified as why it's not working and what you're going to do to address it. And I think that could be an adequate response as an action step too. I don't think you have to reinvent the wheels for every single recommendation, but if the foundation is there and there's parts of that foundation that are crumbling and not working, and clearly based off the fact that they made into the report, there's some issues identified with it. You can identify what those issues are and maybe not reinvent the whole entire wheel. Because some of this I feel like, and I'll play devil's advocate for you guys, I almost feel like all of this has fallen on the deputies and the chiefs. And I don't think that that's fair. And I don't think that you guys have adequate leadership right now to really help guide some of this on your ends. And I feel like this is nothing against Barb. Barb is leaving in 2 more weeks, and this is still going to fall on the deputies and the chiefs. And I don't know what it's going to take to get us to the action items, but I want this board to understand that at the end of the day, the state and whoever Commissioner Ely appoints to help her read through this, they have to understand, they already know what we're not doing right based off the Distinguished Educators Report, plus all the other consultants, because they got all of the consultants' reports collectively on the state site. They need to understand what we're doing differently and what actual action items we're going to take.
So again, returning to the question, I did hear Reverend Davis indicate that she would support the idea of giving the administration another stab at it. Let me refine that point a little bit. So it's not, you're not doing all 4 or all the sections over again, maybe one section. And, you know, spending some time the next 24 hours trying to rework that one section consistent with that, and then bring that back to the board at a meeting in the very near future, so you could make sure that we're all on the same page. And let me just say, on behalf of those folks that have been working this, I think that there was an agreement that this was going to be the format. I mean, this was not just thrown together by people at the last minute. There was extensive conversations about this particular format. I remember at one point, the format that Dr. Lee had and that you and Cecilia had presented they weren't in alignment, and there was conversation about whether Dr. Kino had seen it. So it was a real effort to put them. So to you all's credit, and to everybody's credit, let's not beat up on ourselves so much. Nobody's ever really done this before. I bet you they didn't do this in Buffalo, right? So we'll get it right. I think is there some consensus that we should stop this meeting?
Can I just clarify, though, that I don't have an issue with this format, the way that it is on the Excel. My issue is with the content in this document, not the format of the, I agree with this format, I just don't agree with the content.
No, I get it, but I don't think when people had an agreement about the format, people said, oh, and not that it's anybody's fault, oh, you got to make sure you got, let's say people adopt my approach to sort of bullet form, and no one was really talking about that, probably because nobody's really done this before. We'll get it right. I think the idea that you have is a good one. We'll put this off. We'll try to get some meeting times at the end of this meeting where we can all meet. But you're charged, unless anybody has any objection to it, work on one section. Accountability might make the most sense, since we did go over that. Commissioner Shepard?
Yeah, so I do have an objection to that.
Okay.
And I do want to put out there that this is like presentation 101. So for me, what I don't want to see you guys go back and do one section. I want to see you go back and do everything. And what I would suggest is that you look at all the, what some people would call the low-hanging fruit, things that we can get done, things you can put down, bullets or action steps, however you want to format it. I'm not opposed to the bullet style, that you attack those first so you can get those out the way. And if there are other things that are going to take more time, or we're going to need to wait until we get a new superintendent, then what I would want to see in this report is that you put in there's going to be a plan. You're going to put in why there's going to be a plan, why you're going to wait, and then you're going to put the month or day when you think that you can achieve getting to that plan, because obviously there are some big ticket items in here that you can't go back and go overnight. But what would make this report look much better is if all of the I call it the low-hanging fruit, that there are substantiative action items that are listed there. So at least when people are reviewing it, they know that we have gone through it thoroughly.
So I think there's maybe 2 proposals on the table. Both of them, we're agreeing that, it sounds like we're both agreeing that this matter should be put off, give them some more time. Commissioner Shepard, I apologize if I have this wrong, but you're proposing that they redo all sections, perhaps just focusing on, prioritizing on some, what you would describe as low-hanging fruit. This is really Commissioner LeBron and Commissioner Davis's proposal, propose also that it be put off. My specific proposal is that you just do one section. My concern about doing them all, even the low-hanging fruit, which is a rational approach to sort of make it more efficient, more effective, is that could take more time. And we don't want, I would suggest, we don't want you pursuing a path, and some of you may be feeling this way, for another week or two, and we don't have that, and then to find out with all those sections, you again did it the wrong way. that would be why I would suggest just sampling one section, accountability, and getting back to us within 24, 48 hours. What you all's pleasure? I think we really need to move. I know Reverend Davis has voiced her opinion about it. Anybody else want to talk about it? Commissioner Shepard has. Anybody else?
I would agree with your concerns, President White, that I wouldn't want them to spend all of this time doing the entire document, come back and find out that we're still not okay with it. So I'd rather have a smaller portion done, turn around quicker, so we could proceed and do the whole thing all on the same page.
I see Commissioner LeBron, you're nodding your head. Are you
Yeah,
good with that?
I do agree with the one section, and when we say quicker, I'm talking about 24 to 48 hours, because we don't have that much time.
Absolutely.
And I do agree, I don't want them to go back and change the entire thing, and then they come back and we're like, this is still unacceptable, so they can take one section. And to be honest, I don't even care what section they pick, as long as they pick one section and they demonstrate. So it can be a section that has less recommendations to give us an example of some of the changes, and then we're going to have to work very quickly on this, though.
You know, I think I certainly have no objection to picking another section other than accountability if you think that a section might be easier to go through, because we are literally talking about 24, 48 hours. Teaching and learning, Barbara is suggesting maybe teaching and learning. Whatever, this is your call. I mean, this is the.
I think it depends on the timeline. I think this one only has 4 questions versus teaching and learning would require 48 hours. That would be my gut. But certainly we can do, if we can do teaching and learning, that would bring us to Thursday.
Thursday at the end of the day.
At the end of the day, we would need time to really.
Again, because you guys are, despite the fact the board is engaged in this conversation, you guys are going to do the work. You guys have the degrees in education. You have the experience. What do you think? Which one do you?
I would pick the simplest one to start with to make sure the format is right.
And which one is that?
Accountability. We've
All right.
been on it. It's fresh on our minds. Let's see if we can get
So
it somewhere
here's the time frame, Dr. Massetti Miller. This is what I think, this would be my suggestion. Since we've agreed, sounds to me like we have consensus, this conversation should be put off. But here's my suggestion. It's going to require, and we can begin that conversation tomorrow, that you do this first revision within 24 hours. Send us a copy of it by email, right? So we can look at it. And right now, what we're going to do is we're going to set a meeting 48 hours from now. Hopefully, most board members can attend. And if you couldn't, we can probably work around that. But it would be good if we could come back here within 48 hours to discuss what you've sent us within 24 hours. And by the way, to Dr. Aquino's suggestion, to Commissioner Shepard's concern about engaging us, we're going to be engaged when you send us that first draft. But if to any extent, if you need our suggestion or guidance, you call me up. I certainly don't have any problem you calling any board member up if you want a dialogue about what you think would work, right? Within that 24-hour period. Okay. Does that sound reasonable?
Yes.
All right. So now to my colleagues, if you have your calendars, we're talking about the 17th. Is that right?
Could we do a midday?
Dr. Hallmark suggests a midday. Can anybody do midday? Actually, there's a principals meeting.
What time is the principals meeting?
Principal meeting is all day up until 2 or 3 o'clock, right?
Can we do 3 o'clock?
I can't.
Oh, no? Okay.
No, you said, Reverend Davis, I heard Vice President. You can't do 3? 4, not 4? So it looks like it may be in the evening. Where are you teaching?
You teach?
Yeah, I had some stuff going on. Yeah.
What's your schedule look like for Thursday?
Evening's fine.
Evening's fine.
But not during the day.
I don't anticipate this is going to be a very lengthy meeting because I assume that we're going to all have a chance to review it line by line within 24 hours. So sounds to me like, someone correct me if I'm wrong, we're talking about 5:30?
So I have a function to attend, just throwing it out there. However, I can leave early. I know, 4:30, can folks do 4:30?
I'm fine with 4:30.
4:30?
4:30, Reverend Davis, you good with 4:30?
I'll try 4:30.
Vice President Elliott
Can we
cannot make
Skype
it.
you in?
If you get 4 people, don't wait on me.
Okay.
Because anybody who can't make it will have the administration's email, okay?
But I can't make it, but I will send my feedback.
Absolutely. So, okay, I think we got consensus 4:30. Commissioner Shepherd, are you good for 4:30? All right. All right, so 4:30 on the 17th. We're good?
Yes.
Now, I know, again, very briefly, this is very difficult, strenuous, stressful process for everybody, but hang in there.
We're committed to getting it right and
We
getting it in on
everybody is
time.
absolutely committed.
Yep.
All right? Everybody take a big sigh of relief. Ruth, you want to offer us any insightful words about how to hang in there when people are under stress? Lots of prayer. There you go. That'll do it. Okay.
For clarity,
yes.
though, Thursday is just going to be just managing what I need to be prepared for
Sure.
with our team. Is that we're just going to go over the sample.
The sample.
The sample.
Just that.
Okay.
That's it.
And Barb reminds me, and I know that people would do this, people need to continue to work. Yeah. So, by the way, as you get this sample, and within 48 hours on the 17th at 5:30, when you find out everything's good, you all need to light up your computers and whoever's responsible for these sections and try to do something in alignment with that.
We'll be meeting with Dr. Aquino tomorrow, so
all right.
First thing.
Hang in there, as my dad used to say. We'll get through this.
All right, thank you.
Madam Clerk, do we have anything else on the agenda? No. All right, so who wants to call for?
I will.
Commissioner LeBron? Is there a second? Is there a second to adjourn the meeting? Second by Reverend Davis. All those in favor? A healthy aye, yay. Yes. All right, we're adjourned. Good night, everybody.